Guys, thank you for coming out today. By a show of hands, has anybody heard this talk before the vertical core? I didn't do it last year. But it's been, the first time I had an opportunity to do this talk actually was back in 2005, and it was the first time that Chris actually gave me an opportunity to speak on tour. I got really, really lucky. One of his power hitters backed out at the last second, and he gave me an opportunity to get on tour, and I did this talk. It's evolved a lot since the inception of that, and you'll see that that change in it if you guys have seen it before. So the 5 people that did raise your hand, you'll see that there's a pretty dramatic change in it. I have a lot to be thankful for. So I'm going to start with some thank yous. Obviously, you understand how close Chris and I are. I've been really lucky to design 5 or 6 amazing facilities, and Chris has been basically built out the entire infrastructure to all those facilities. I will tell you, as practitioners in this field, you have the opportunity to go and hunt out equipment companies that help you, right? No one like this guy. I mean, from the 3D design to your facility to having every modality that you could potentially have for that facility to help your clients become better. But really and truly, a great leader in the equipment field. But what he's done with this seminar has really transcended the education of our field. And that's the whole key, is how can we keep evolving? And I think the seminar that he's put together, it's the best value by far. It's not even close. And so I just want to make sure that I thank him. I want to thank the Clippers real quick. I work for Steve Ballmer, who is always, at the end of every year, it's just always about what are we doing to become better. You'll see in this talk a major influence in my journey is Gary Gray. And we've been able to blend this into a bunch of different systems, and we've made a lot of mistakes. And that's really how this talk has come about, is basically we've made mistakes, and then we've gone out and tried to find the solutions to those mistakes, and we've found sustainable training systems through that. I want to thank the speakers, because some of these guys have become some of my best friends. And here's the cool part for you guys, is you'll see that we all don't necessarily align totally with philosophies, but the one commonality that Chris has done, he's brought in great human beings that can have constructive conversation, and the cool part is you guys get to sit in the chair and you guys get to make the decision on how you want to do it, right? That's the cool part. And so, but the group of people have been unbelievable, so I wanted to thank them. And then lastly, really and truly, it's on the weekend. You guys are here to get better. You have paid money to somehow seek knowledge so you could help the people that you work with. And really and truly, if I could give you one piece of advice after 30 years, it's what it's all about. My first job, I made $11,000 for 4 years, but I had a guy that let me go anywhere in the country and learn. And that opportunity was exponential in my curve to actually teach you some of the things that I have today. This is a business that evolved 20 plus years ago. Training for the game team. Can you guys stand up real quick? So I just want to make sure I thank these guys. These guys are my family. And my business partner and co-owner, Chris Braden, over in the corner, who worked with me at the University of Texas, has done an amazing job growing this facility. And if you guys have an opportunity to meet these people, if you have your own facility right now, these are people that you want to learn from. They'll be in the hands-on to help us out too. Thank you guys. I just wanted to make sure that I recognized you guys. I have one other buddy here, Wislow. So Logan was with me probably, how many years, Lo? Yeah, I think 10. A lot of the things you're going to see, we really collaborated with each other, with Chris Braden and all the group that just stood up. This isn't me. This is a group of people that when we had problems, we threw it out on the table and we came to solutions. These are my kids' feet in 2005. It's the first time I had a chance to do the talk. That's them now. It goes by exceptionally fast. Married to her 28 years today. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. That's a misscheduling, just for the men out there. That's a real poor scheduling decision. So here are the objectives to today's talks. I'm going to share some stories with you where we made mistakes, but those things were pivotal in the career, and just seeing how we looked at training differently. We'll look at common core dysfunctions. We're going to understand global chain reaction biomechanics. We're going to look at the functional anatomy of the core and its commonalities, and then look at basically the principles and the truths to human movement and how those things drive this system, okay? The last 10 years, this science of fascia has really started to come in, and it's really changed how we should look at human movement, but it really kind of supported the original talk back in 2005, so I'm going to blend that in a little bit. And then we're going to get into the vertical core training progressions. This is 2001, 2002. I'm a traditional strength coach. I'm snatching, I'm cleaning. Well, I'm a combination between machine-based and Olympic lifting. This is the night before the game. We're at the University of Utah, and this kid, he has massive back spasms. And I'm in his room, and I'm stretching him, and I'm telling him, "You're gonna be all right." And he's like, "Yeah, coach, you got me." And I was like, "Yeah, I got you, man. I'm gonna fix you. You're gonna be okay." Realizing as I'm stretching him, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, because I can't fix his back. I know I can't fix his back. Now, his back really doesn't have anything to do with the injury, but it was a pivotal moment in my career where I felt like I was a mechanic, right? Like you hear something's wrong under the engine of your hood, right? And so you get out and you open the hood up and you're looking at it and you're like, "I'll wiggle on the spark plug. I'll check the dipstick." Dude, you don't know what you're doing. Shut the hood. And it was an epiphany for me that I was like, I don't understand functional anatomy. I couldn't understand why this guy's back hurt, and I was on the hunt. And that's when everything kind of flipped and my glasses really changed in how I saw the world, okay? So this is the next big story. Maybe 3 years later, we got a great team. I mean, a really good team. And we got this kid, he's an elite rebounder. And he's from Schenectady, New York. And he's got a low back problem that I can't fix. I have no idea how to fix it. And I put him on an airplane, and I fly him to Colorado with Gary Gray, okay? I'm gonna play these two videos for you just so you can see it. Look at the left foot. You can see how the left foot's bent over just a little bit more than the right. And as he stands there, you could really see the heel bone is called the calcaneus, which at this point in time, I didn't even know that, okay? So if you don't know it, don't worry about it, because if I learned it, trust me, you can learn it. I'm gonna play the video on the other side. I just want you to notice the arm swing. What do you guys see in his arms? One's doing nothing. The other one's basically pinned to his side. It was a pattern that I'd noticed all the time when I saw this guy run. He would have massive back spasms. So I fly him to Colorado, and Gary tells me, "Take off his shoes, take off his shirt." So I'm like, okay, I get the shirt piece, but I'm not sure if I'm following the shoe piece. And he's like, "Look, his left heel is bent over." And I'm like, "Man, I don't know what you're talking." I said, "Gary, it's his back." He goes, yeah, no, I get it. And so we end up going back and forth with an exchange, but it gets kind of adversarial. Like I'm pissed because I've been trying to figure this thing out for like 6 months. And he says, "Todd, his left foot is locked in inversion. It's causing his back problem." And so I'm like, "Gary, I don't quite understand that." So basically, there's the foot, right? That's the calcaneus right there. You'll see it actually offsets to the side, right? Well, his was locked in this position. And because it was locked, what happened was the talus didn't fall down and in when the foot hit the ground. So basically, these two bones wouldn't load, the big femur bone wouldn't load, and his left front hip got locked. Well, when I run, and my left foot hits the ground, and I run in that direction, if I took this arm and I threw it back, right? That's what happens when I run. I create this abdominal stretch load from this shoulder to this hip. But because this hip was really tight, he built in this adaptation to not throw the arm back, because what would happen if he threw the arm back? He would blow the back out. So now I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. He's like, yeah. I was like, so everything I knew at that point, I was like, holy shit. Like, I don't know anything. And it was so humbling to me at that point. This kid that we struggled for 6 months, bridging him, planking him, doing everything we could to stabilize his pelvis, we had cleaned up in 4 weeks. We went to the Final Four. We lost to Carmelo Anthony in probably the best performance that I've actually ever witnessed as a coach live. But this kid went on to break the all-time rebounding record at the University of Texas. So now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I got this gigantic toolbox of all these things that I've been doing, and I'm like, I better take a right-hand turn here. So I go home to my wife, and I got that model, this model right here, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm counting the bones. 1, 2, 3. She goes, what are you doing? I'm counting the bones. She goes, why? I go, because I don't know how many are in the foot. I go, Kate, I don't even know how many bones are in the body. She goes, well, let's look it up. So we look it up, 206 bones in your body, 26 in this foot, 26 in the other foot, 52 bones. Like, okay, I'm not Einstein, but like, this thing must be pretty important, right? So all of a sudden, I start diving into this thing like crazy. I'm gonna learn the soft tissue structures, all the joints. I'm crazy over this thing for the years to come. I'm about to show you a video of what the chain reaction biomechanics actually look like when the foot hits the ground. And if the foot is altered, is jammed up, or the joints don't have the sequencing correct, you're gonna get dysfunction up the chain. So you'll see, when we get the rear view, that's the calcaneus. And when the foot hits the ground, the calcaneus is gonna evert, okay? It's a very small motion, but it's like the trigger to the gun. If you don't have it, you're gonna have problems. You'll see the stick, how the stick falls down at the diagonal angle. So the talus on the inside slides down and in, which right there. Now as the mass momentum passes over my center line, I'm gonna get to the big toe and I'm gonna load the big toe. So traditionally when I was stretching the calf joint, you would just do the Rocky stretch. You'd pin up against the wall and just do the calf stretch. Well, the foot is a huge rotational transducer of movement, huge. And so when you actually get your people to stretch that component, you want to put the transverse plane into it, okay? Okay, so all of a sudden I'm learning about the foot. I have all these back problems. Okay, let's check out where the functional anatomy actually exists to the core. You'll see in the video, all the musculature starts getting stripped off. So as I start to learn this, I start to realize there's a commonality in all of it. And we'll go through those here in just a second. Every single one of the muscles attach in on the pelvis in some way, shape, or form, and attach in on the rib cage. Every single one of them, okay? Well, if you look at the ribs, if you wrap it around, every single rib ties into the thoracic spine. Okay, so as the rib cage lifts and loads, I store eccentric energy into my core from the top down. But as my legs and feet move in space, I start to store energy into my core from the ground up. So it can be driven both top down and bottom up, okay? You'll look at, this is the external oblique. So the outer surface of ribs 5 through 12, and then the linea alba, the pubic crest, and the superior iliac spine of the pelvis right there, okay? So same thing that we just talked about, rib cage and pelvis. Transverse abdominis, this one's a little different, and I think it's different for a reason. I don't know this for fact, but I'm gonna give you my hypothesis on it. It actually hooks under the rib cage, okay? And when it comes down, it actually hooks on the inside of the iliac crest, okay? I think it's for a reason. I think, like, if you see something that's about to come and strike you, right, the bracing mechanism of pulling, right, it take the ribs and pull it down to protect the internal organs. That's basically what the rib cage does, protects all the internal organs. So, and that's a complete hypothesis, but if you look at just the design to it alone, and then this muscle actually reaches around and ties into some of the thoracolumbar fascia. So it's anteriorly loaded and then wraps around and blends into the fascia on the back also, okay? The rectus abdominis. So the origin starts on the pubis symphysis and then hooks on the xiphoid process and then on this cartilage to the ribs. And you'll look at the angulation to this one. This one's more vertically loaded, right? You'll notice the other muscles that we looked at, they were more diagonally loaded, okay? So you could start to see the multidimensional design to the core just by looking at the functional anatomy. Here's the internal oblique. The deep layer of the thoracolumbar fascia, 2/3 of the iliac crest, the lateral 2/3 of the inguinal ligament, which is basically right here. The inguinal ligament's going to fall right down through here, okay? The lower margins of ribs 10 through 12, the pubic crest and the anterior posterior layers of the linea alba. The linea alba is that white gigantic sheath in the center of the core. So all the core is blended into this linea alba. We're going to go over the fascia piece a little bit later, and you'll understand why that's so important. But it's basically the crossroads to how all these muscles intersect into your core. Here's the quadratus lumborum. Okay, so the posterior part of the iliac crest, so basic in the back part here. Now, how about this one, though? It actually hooks into the rib cage, but it has a direct connection to the lumbar spine, 1 through 5. So on these transverse processes, so hooks in here, and basically creates these guide wires for the lumbar spine, okay? Lateral flexion, rotation, a huge muscle in stabilizing the lumbar spine. Is the lat a core muscle? According to this, it is. And you can't deny, look at the angulation to the lat, right? How do we train the lat? Traditionally, right? So just check out where the insertions are, though. It actually has an attachment onto the shoulder blade. So right where it comes to a triangle, it attaches onto the shoulder blade. That shoulder blade has 19 other muscle attachments to it, okay? It hooks in ribs 9 through 12, and it attaches to T7 through T12 on the vertebrae. Blends into the thoracolumbar fascia, and then back into the iliac crest, okay? Now, here's the killer to it. Basically, this hooks into the humerus, and it wraps around the humerus. So as my arm moves in space, I start to eccentrically load the lat, right? The same thing that started to drive that concept of top down. So as my arm lifts in space and reaches in space, I start to put energy down into my core from the top down. I'm going to show you this real quick before we move on. We have the femur, and we have the humerus. What's the commonality in those two right there? Ball and socket. Ball being the key, right? So in your training system, ready? It's not totally omnidirectional, but it's meant to go a whole lot of ways, man. If it wasn't, it'd be a hinge joint. So just imagine that lat hooks into that humerus. So as my arm moves in space, I start to store energy into my core from the top down. The arms are a huge loader into the core, okay? So I just wanted to show you these things because if you think about your training system right now, how many angulations are you training these bones at? It's obviously designed for a huge amount of variability. So if you're just loading it in one way, you might want to just think a little different. I'm not saying it's wrong, but just think differently. Just look at the design of the body. Okay. So there's the functional anatomy, okay? So basically, here's the rules to the vertical core. If the pelvis is able to move in 3 dimensions and the rib cage is able to move in 3 dimensions, you got an opportunity to probably convert energy between the pelvis and the rib cage pretty efficiently, okay? We're gonna show you how to analyze and how to evaluate the 3-dimensionality of the hip and the 3-dimensionality of the rib cage, but also we shared with you the importance to the foot. So these are the truths of the human movement. These are basically the things that support this entire system because they're the truths. This is how we actually move. So these are the primary drivers to human function. If you lifted me off the ground right now, say if I had cables on my hips, you lifted me off the ground, how hard could I throw that ball? I would still throw it pretty hard because I've been doing it for a long time, but how much harder would I throw it with my feet on the ground? Huge, huge. And so if you're really talking about the function of the core, ground reaction forces are a huge piece to how you store energy and how you release energy. The gravity piece, we're all overcoming gravity as we're standing here. If not, we'd be puddles on the floor, okay? But the last piece is the mass and momentum of our bodies and how those create chain reaction biomechanics into our pelvis. So that ball is a 12-pound ball. So as I swing the ball, right, it creates a chain reaction into my right side of my body. And then as that coils, I use that energy to push through the ground to fire the ball off the wall, okay? But this is the truth. These are the 3 primary drivers to function. Here's the other truth to it. Human movement's 3-dimensional. You move in the sagittal plane. Anterior, if I move forward, that's anterior. If I move backwards, that's posterior, okay? It's called the sagittal plane. Frontal plane, if I move right lateral or if I move left lateral, I have now moved in the frontal plane. Or I could go left rotational, or I could go right rotational. It's the truth. There's 6 angulations. 6 angulations from the ground up, 6 angulations from the top down, okay? So now just start to think about, if you just know the principles of the 6 angulations, you could build your own training system. You don't need this. That's the whole key, I think, in teaching, is teaching you the principles, and then you use the creative mind that you have. You know the problems to the people in front of you. You're able to open your toolbox up and create your own exercises. Here's just another demonstration to it. So you'll see this first one. They're stepping to the right, but you also see their side bending. So you have both planes of motion from the top down and the bottom up. Here we got anterior translation, we got an anterior lunge, arms overhead reaching back, sagittal plane. On this one, this is a hard one to actually see, but basically the image is I would be drop stepping. And as I drop step, I would swing the ball, right? And so I have a drop step lunge, which is a transverse plane load, and the swing of the ball creates a transverse plane load from the top down. So that is what's called vector-based training. The majority of training happens right here. And when I was the first 10 years of my coaching, everything happened here, right? Well, you ready? It may start here, but I'm coming out of that stance and I'm moving on these vectors. And so I explained vectors. If I was standing in the middle of a traditional clock, and I wanted to lunge to 2 or 3 o'clock, which happens in our game a lot on the offensive end of the floor. Or if I took and I went across my body, I would go common side if I stayed on this side. If I crossed my midline, it would be uncommon. But you'll see a lot of shake and boom, I cross over. That would be an uncommon lunge, okay? But we created this vector system, and because our guys have a hard time remembering sagittal, frontal, and transverse plane, we put colors on it. So it's like paint by colors, it's crayon. And I think the simpler you can make your teaching, the better it is. Now, guys remember red, blue, and green all the time. You may get saggiversial or something that's like a mix between. We try to teach them the planes, but we basically color-coded them to create some simplicity to the teaching. So here's the principles of top-down and bottom-up. You'll see the arrows on the bottom dictate where my feet and pelvis are going. And then the arrows from the top down are creating another one. So once again, just to give you the concepts of the planes of motion so you can build your own toolbox, right? I know that ball looks heavy right now, and that's 7 years ago too, so it'd be real heavy for me right now. Transverse plane, bottom up and top down, okay? So movement is proprioceptively driven, right? And so our muscles are reactors. You'll see the picture. When my foot hits the ground, the tissue starts to lengthen. The joint basically starts to bend. With gravity, mass and momentum, that's the soft tissue starts to lengthen, okay? That sends signals up into our spinal column, which goes up into our central nervous system to teach us how to coordinate movement, okay? It's the truth. Everything's proprioceptively driven. They're transducers of information, mechanical stress into electrical signal into the spine and up into the brain. And then this is what proprioceptors sense: speed, direction, joint compression, joint range, and soft tissue length. Basically, motion turns on the proprioceptors, which turn on the muscles to decelerate that motion, okay? I put this in the program right here, proprioceptors. So this is in the program. I'm not going to do this right now because this would be an hour talk in itself. But I put this in for you guys so you could actually see what the mechanoreceptors are, okay? So basically, here's the summary to the principles to human movement. It's driven. Top down and bottom up. It's three-dimensional. It's vector-based, sagittal, frontal, and transverse. It's integrated. Chain reaction biomechanics. We're about to go into the fascia here in just a second. It's proprioceptively driven, and it's transformational. I didn't go over transformational yet, and that's purposeful because of the next story you're about to hear. So transformational basically means that something has to stretch load. It has to stretch load in order to load and explode. If you can't load something, you're not going to be able to explode into something out of it, okay? Here's story number 2. I think Chris and Logan are with me at this time. We get this kid out of high school. He has a chance to go directly to the NBA. He has a chance to be a lottery pick out of the NBA, but he has a condition called a spondylosis of his back, okay? And basically, he has some instability of the articulate cartilage that comes off of the spine, okay? And he's created a disruption there, and it's unstable. So we get this kid, and I get him up on the table. I said, take your shoes off. He said, Coach, it's my back. I said, yeah, no, I get it. Let me check it out, you know? So I start checking it out, and I get to this ray, this big toe. What do you guys notice in that big toe? It's an HV bunion. It's called a hallux valgus bunion, okay? And so it creates this valgus stress. They don't necessarily really scare me until you push back on it. And his wouldn't push back. So I basically get him on the table. I take the first ray and I try to push it back, and it's a 2x4. I mean, it feels like this thing's welded together. So when we put him up in function, and I try to squat him into the ankle, he has no dorsiflexion whatsoever, okay? So we're like, okay, well, this is optimistic. We might have a chance at helping this low back. So basically what's going on is, as his right foot comes back, right, he can't propulse himself off the big toe, which you'll see in that picture, and you'll see in that picture. So the chain reaction biomechanics happen. If that was the first ray, he opens the foot up. So the pelvis comes flying back twice as fast on the right side, and he breaks the facets at L4, L5. So we stop. Now this one's a little more complicated. We have to outsource somebody to come in, get a first ray cutout. They teach us how to mobilize the first ray. We stop mobilizing it. But someone that had this problem for well over a year and a half, we had this cleaned up in 6 weeks. This guy gets picked, top 5 pick. He's made over $200 million in the NBA. Just recently retired. So now the traditional toolbox, boop, that sucker's out the window. Like we're bringing all this stuff back at Gary Gray. We're throwing it on the table, and we're moshing it back and forth. But after this one comes about, we know we need to think differently and start riding down that path that we've selected. So basically, here's the iliopsoas that's attached to that chain reaction biomechanics of the big toe, right? You'll see it actually hooks to all the transverse processes of T12 all the way to L5, but then hooks on the lesser trochanter of the femur. So actually, it's on the femur bone. So as I translate that direction, I eccentrically load the iliopsoas. Well, just imagine that dude couldn't get through his big toe. So he opens it up. This whole area just gets locked down, which basically ends up snapping those facets. This is a big reason why this muscle is a huge one, and you'll see once we start to get into the progressions, you'll understand why we load the way that we do.
I'm going to volunteer my leadership to this platoon. An army without leaders is like a foot without a big toe. And Sergeant Hulka isn't always going to be there to be that big toe. I think that we owe a big round of applause to our newest, bestest buddy, Big Toe, Sergeant Hulka.
Okay, so I got one or two little chuckles. You ready? Anybody that's in their 30s right now, raise your hand. Can anybody name the movie? Nice, nice. That never happens. That never happens. If you're in your 30s and you haven't seen this movie, this is an all-time classic. You guys got to see this movie. It's unbelievable. I'm very impressed with, we got multiple stripes coming out right there. I'm very impressed. Okay, so here are the mobility rules to the vertical core. The foot, the hips, and the T-spine. These are the big areas of the transverse plane, okay? The transducers of the transverse plane. So if the ankle and foot are tight, there's a good chance the core ain't right. If the butt ain't moving, the abdominals ain't grooving. That's Gary Gray. And I couldn't think of a rhyme for the thoracic spine. Nice. I gotta let, in Chicago, no one laughed. So I changed the delivery that time. I appreciate the giggles. But look, 3 dimensions of the foot, 3 dimensions of the hip, 3 dimensions of the T-spine. If you go through that system, you got a good chance of cleaning stuff up without even knowing what the hell you're doing. So there you go. Here's an example of the ankle mobility. We use these cradles to get that little calcaneal eversion. I'm using my left leg as a driver to create a chain reaction in my right leg. Okay? And you'll see how I use the driver to get all 6 angulations in. They don't make this cradle anymore. We bought them all up, but we got like 500 of them. But they don't make them anymore. Here's an example of the front hip. I'm using the wall as a point of stability, and my pelvis is the driver right now. So I'm moving my pelvis in the frontal plane, and I'm going to move my pelvis in the transverse plane like it's a steering wheel. I'm going to steer it to the left. I'm going to steer it to the right. Now I'm going to incorporate my arms into it. The iliopsoas, remember we talked about the iliopsoas. So as my arm reaches up, it lifts the rib cage up. I start to store energy into that core. I'm using my arms as a driver to put the mobility into that front hip with my arms, okay? Here's the back hip. I'm using an oscillation front to back, side to side. That's wrong. The green, that's not correct. It should be green right now. Now I'm going to use my hands. So I use the pelvis and a hand driver to create the mobility in my back right hip. By the position I put you in, I've influenced that back right hip. Now I'm going to the lateral hip. So you'll see I'm making an X with my stance, okay? The X basically starts to load that lateral hip. I'm using the pelvis as a driver, transverse plane. And remember what we talked about with the proprioceptors, right? Proprioceptors understand motion. So I'm picking a stance, influencing it with trunk flexion to put massive loads into that lateral hip, and then those little wiggles, I'm taking those proprioceptors, I'm just lighting them on. I'm just firing light switches up and down. Bang, 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 bang. So now I'm going to be ready when I start to load and head out, okay? Okay, so the original talk had nothing to do with this. It didn't exist. 2012, I'm at Perform Better. We're talking about speakers, right? I'm in Chicago. I walk in between the talk, and I'm listening to Thomas Myers. He's got one of these things in his hands. I'm like, what the hell's that thing? I've never seen that thing. And he's like kind of squishing it, and he's like kind of moving it. And I'm like, that thing's really cool looking. He goes, this is our body. I said, bullshit, no way. He said, yeah, no, seriously. He didn't really talk to me, but I was talking to him in my mind at the time. This is a tensegrity model of the pelvis, okay? The sticks are bones, okay? All the elastics are the connective tissue. Ligaments, tendons, all the fascia, right? And so you'll see as my legs move, the force gets distributed through the entire structure, right? But I just told you about those guys that were locked up, right, in their feet. If I took that, and I took that right front hip and I wound it down, what does it do to the structure? It alters it, right? And this is where fascia really starts to come in. It's called the tensegrity model. This is what fascia really is. It's the biological fabric that holds our whole body together, okay? It's omnidirectional. You see all the angulations? Goes every which way. So if you're training one way, guess what's happening? Those lines of collagen, they're just laying down in that direction, okay? I just showed you the ball of the hip and the ball of the humerus, right? It doesn't want to go one way. It wants multiple directions, okay? It's an organ of support that creates a tensional network. This collagen fiber actually has the tension of steel. If you ever done, how many people in here have ever done a dissection lab? Crazy, right? Like you get to certain parts of this fascial tissue where the retinaculum of the foot or the retinaculum, you almost can't cut it with a scalpel for a reason. It's there to create tensional support. Here are the key features to fascia. It's viscous, it's elastic, and it's plastic. Viscous meaning this. It has the opportunity to change. The hydrodynamics to the fluid actually can change. So it can be thicker, and it can be thicker under speed of movement. It helps you decelerate movement, or it can become more lubricant-like. And it becomes lubricant-like because the muscles slide and glide on top of each other. But if you have a massive trauma, the fibroblasts build up, and it creates this adhesion that doesn't allow the slide and glide mechanism to actually happen, okay? It actually has an elastic recoil property. It doesn't contract, but if I stretch it, it would snap back, okay? So it loves bounce, it loves stretch, it loves recoil. The last part is it's plastic. It can change its shape to handle the stresses that it has, and it'll remodel along those lines that you put on it. But at some point in time, if you put too much force in it, so much force that it can't handle the tension, it'll rupture, okay? So real quick, I'm not sure if yet there's the video. These are superfascial structures. You got the 3 insertion to the hamstrings, okay, which turn into the sacrotubular ligament, which turns into a sacral ligament that comes across the body, which you're going to see here in a second, and then goes into a multifidus ligament on the opposite side of the body. They come in these X's. A lot of the fascial system work in X's for a reason. If I'm going that direction, right, and my shoulders rotate, I create this diagonal load. Well, just imagine what's going on the back side of this right now when this foot hits the ground. This back butt and this back shoulder is creating another X, okay? The glute max turns into the into the thoracolumbar fascia, which turns into another ligament on the other side, and then blends into the quadratus lumborum. So basically, these structures have been dissected and shown that they actually exist. They're a full continuum. So this is what fascia loves. It loves variability of movement. It loves angles, it loves tempo, it loves load. Hydrodynamics, fascia needs movement in order to move fluids through it, so the different tissues change the viscoelastic properties. If you're not moving multidirectionally, there's a good chance you're not taking care of this system. Well, you're taking care of it in whatever direction you're moving in, but you want to move with as many directions as you can. How am I doing on time? 2:15, I got 30 more minutes? I'm good. Okay, so I talked about the tensegrity unit already to you in the story, okay? Basically, forces are evenly distributed through this entire tensional network, but if one area gets really bound down, foot, hip, or T-spine, we've simplified that for you a little bit, there's a chance that forces are going to get redirected into other areas, okay? This would be called a fascial pull. Do you think this looks symmetrical? And the human body is incredible. Like, I mean, this kid went on to have a great college career, and I'm not sure, I think he's playing overseas now, but do you think he might be in a little bit of uncomfortable pieces of his body? Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Countless lines, extending from the head to the foot, from one hand right across the shoulders to the other hand, even spiraling through the entire torso. He believes that when we have pain in one place, the cause can often be found in a totally different area.
That's so foreign, right? Like you feel like you got pain, you want to go address that pain, right? The knee pain. But you really want to look globally. You do want to attack the pain, but you got to look globally. There's something above or below it that there's a probability that there's something above or below that's causing the dysfunction, okay? So here is the fascial system. Thomas Myers has actually dissected these lines, and he's written a book, Anatomy Trains. After Thomas was playing with this thing, I just dove in. Like I was like, this thing made sense to me, so I just started to learn as much as I could. And in the last couple of years, done a lot of dissection labs, gone to the Fascial Congress in Canada. There's a lot of incredibly smart people. This is a really young science, but you're gonna wanna keep your eyes on it. Superficial back line, superficial front line, lateral line, spiral front line, functional back line, functional front line, deep front line. I'm sorry, the spiral line has both a front and back line, okay? These things exist. There's 4 other arm lines that actually exist, in the back and in the front, from the pec out to the hands. So just like the foot was to the hip, the hand is to the shoulder, okay? Just slightly different concept. So how do we know that these lines really exist? Well, one, I just told you that Thomas Myers has taken them out fully in a dissection lab and laid them on the table, so you know that they exist. But this is the other reason.
Chains really exist. In a series of experiments, Bilger has looked for evidence of the back line that Meyer describes. Here, moving the ankle should trigger movement of the fascia at the back of the upper thigh. And in fact, the ultrasound indicates a gliding of the fascia there.
So you have these clients, they come into you, my neck hurts, my low back hurts. They get MRIs, they get x-rays. You're okay, you're all right. No, you're okay because fascia doesn't come up on an MRI or an x-ray. This technology, ultrasound, I was introduced to it when I got into the MBA. It's been around before that, so it's been around 9 years. And it's really shown that it could see the densification of tissue and the lack of slide and glide mechanism. It's been a huge tool for us to be able to diagnose where that snag in the system probably is. Now, there will be some things that will be coming up to be able to help your clients, some diagnostic testing that will be able to identify densification in tissue. But right now, ultrasound, if you actually have a client that is really frustrated with the lack of diagnostic testing, you want to try to find an ultrasound specialist in that area that can really identify these things and probably give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of what might be really going on, okay? So this is the most important part to the fascial system, though, is Davis's law. It's an anatomy and physiology law that's been around forever, and it basically says this: according to the mechanical loads as coaches, we get to choose what goes into the system, right? Well, through the mechanical stress that we put into it, what happens is this concept of mechanotransduction. And mechanotransduction means it takes the mechanical force and it starts to go through a chemical process where the collagen starts to get laid down in the directions that we actually load in, okay? So if you look at the system, and remember we talked about it's omnidirectional in nature, we want to make sure that we're putting in a ton of variability of force to create a thick, robust connective tissue system. Does that make sense? Davis's law. The corollary to that is Wolff's law. You got athletes that you've worked, navicular fractures, fifth met heads, stress reactions of the shin, right? Same concept. The inside of that is called trabeculi, all the wire-looking things. You ready? If you train the bone and flex it and extend it, flex and extend it, it's just going to lay down trabeculi in that area. Then all of a sudden I got to plant and I got to rotate on that bone. It's not going to like it. It's not going to like it at all. So you want to put the forces into the bone that build it, okay? I love this quote. Thomas Myers gave me this quote. So you hear the story of how the glasses change, right? New discoveries and new techniques will not come from finding new structures, but from looking at known structures in new ways. That's what I really felt like when I started to learn from Gary and I started to learn the fascial system. It just made me keep changing my glasses and how I saw the world. I think that's the key, is if you're not creating results with your athletes, just keep searching for what it is. I am really lucky. You see how many people I thanked. I'm not the brightest light bulb on the Christmas tree, I have to admit. But I am crazy curious. And I have to learn a particular way. And so I need people like that team that just stood up, and we throw it out there, and then all of a sudden someone will say one thing, and bing, it registers with me. And so my learning environment, I need these people, and that's why I make sure that I thank them. Okay, last story for you. Last story. We're at the University of Texas. We just had those 2 kids, right? Someone comes to me and says, hey, we hear you finding this niche in low back pain. I said, yeah, kind of. Like, well, we fixed a couple backs. I don't know if you could say that or not. We got a guy, I got a friend. He wants to come in and see if you'll look at him. Sure, we'll do that. He comes in. He's about to get back surgery. He's about to have L3, L4 fused and L4, L5 fused. So he comes walking in, and you can kind of tell, even when he walks in, he's got like this giddy up. And I asked the guy, I said, have you had any lower body injuries? He goes, well, it's my back. I said, yeah, no, I get it. I said, he goes, yeah, actually, like almost 2 years ago, a horse reared up and fell on me, and it snapped my leg, and it compound fractured, actually ripped out of the skin. Wow, that's pretty nasty. So can I check your ankle out? He's like, yeah, but it's my back. Yep, I get it. So I get to the ankle. It's suckers. It's like it's frozen. Like I almost can't get anything out of it. But in the first session, we're mobilizing it, and we start to get a little bit of movement. And so he's like, I don't know what you're doing. He goes, I've been all over town. No one's even talked about my foot. He goes, everybody's been treating my back. I said, well, look, we're learning this stuff from a physical therapist in Michigan. I said, you want to mess around? Let's mess around. Like, we'll come in the mornings before I train the guys. Like, we'll come in, and so I train them like 5 or 6 times. We get a lot of motion out of the foot. He's like, shit, man, my back's feeling better. Cool, that's exciting. So a month or 2 goes by. He goes, hey, why don't you guys open a business? I said, I ain't doing it. Not doing it. I said, I don't have the money. I'm not going to borrow other people's money. He goes, well, look, I have these buildings over on the west side of Austin, Texas. Why don't you take the space and just see if you can get it going, and you guys will treat me over there. I go, you kidding me? He goes, no. We roll into that space. Logan, Chris, you moved off to Texas Texas Tech for a little bit, but there's 3 or 4 other guys. We go in there, I get a loan for 10 grand. We throw AstroTurf on the ground. We use the emergency lighting. Boom, 3 months, we got it rolling. 20 years later, train for the game. Like pivotal moments that you can't deny that. Like, and Chris and this team has taken that business and turned it into an elite fitness business. If you're ever in Austin, Texas, you want to go. I'm not kidding. If you walk in, the experience to it is unlike anything you'll ever see. It's driven in applied functional science, but the group of people that we have put together, their DNA, it's special. And because it's special, the group, the culmination of that energy makes it elite. You want to take a peek at it if you got a chance to. So you're like, all right, the foot. Well, here's all the fascial lines that connect in the bottom of the foot, the deep front line, right? You got the lateral line. All these things hook in on the bottom of the foot, which was basically causing the dysfunction in his low back. Tom Stacy is his name. Great man. Without him, we're not there. So you're like, for crying out loud, coach, teach us the system. Okay, here we go. You ready? Here's the vertical core progressions. Progression 1. So you'll see my pelvis is relatively stable, but I'm in a big split stance. See how I'm using the arms, right? As my arms lift and reach, I am eccentrically storing energy into my core from the top down, and because of the stance that I influenced it in, I'm loading heavily out of my right front core, my right anterior core, because of the stance that I just stood in, okay? So I just changed the stance. I just got 10-pound dumbbells, but as I'm reaching back, right, I'm storing eccentric energy. I have to decelerate that 10-pound dumbbell. I have to load and explode. I'm using the proprioceptors correctly, right? Transverse plane. This is the facility in Philadelphia, actually. Here's the big fella doing it. That's Joel Embiid. You'll see he's reaching in the sagittal plane with a viper, and then he has to reach up. So he's actually comboing. As he reaches down, he's putting a chain reaction into the back hip, and then as he reaches up, he's putting a chain reaction into the front core. Here's progression 2, controlled pelvic motion with a top-down driver. We're going to start the lunge while driving from the top down. The lunge creates a relative bottom-up drive with the top-down arm drive. And then you'll see we're going to start in the progression 2, we're going to start to throw medicine balls. This is a core staple in all of our training programs, and this is why. The posterior lunge does 3 really big and important things. Remember all the dysfunctions that we talked about. What's happening when my big toe goes backwards? It's loading in massive amounts of dorsiflexion of the first ray. I'm extending through the front hip. It's one of the big dysfunctions of our guys. And then as my arms reach up, I'm opening the thoracic spine in the sagittal plane. Now, I'm using one arm at a time because of this. If I use both arms at the same time, it's a different load to the thoracic spine. I want to start with a one-arm driver because it gives me a little bit of rotation. It allows me to get through extension, but if I put both arms up, it's different. So the bilateral arm driver is a more intensive at the end of the progressions. So I'm doing a frontal plane oscillation, then into a sagittal plane load. And you could see just how much harder it is for me because I have both hands on the ball, right? You're going to see I'm going to change my stances to influence my pelvis differently. Okay, right foot up, left foot up, wide, narrow. So I'm going to teach you real quick the stances. So basically it's called the safety syntax, right? My feet and my hands. If I move my right foot up, I moved it up on the sagittal plane vector. So I could go right foot up, left foot up to have a sagittal plane influence. On the frontal plane, I could go narrow or I could go wide. And because I'm sliding on the frontal plane vector, I'm influenced at either narrow or wide. And then you'll see my toes are in or my toes are open. Internally rotated, I'm winding the hip up in the transverse plane or I'm opening it up in the transverse plane. Okay, so I'm changing the stances as the momentum loads. But think about it, I've just put 6 different angulations into that with the same med ball throw by just changing the stances. Do we have any questions up to this point? Because I'm going to slow down because I think I'm going to be done really fast. I'll take 1 or 2 questions if anybody has one right now. No? Good. Yes.
This seems to be kind of a build on the vector-based training, right? So this is just specifically now kind of dissecting it at the core level. And then from my understanding from what you had said, as you're programming this through, you should be thinking about both lower body and upper body, right? When you're while you can go through the movement. So maybe your lower body is locked in, and you're doing upper body things for some of them, reverse it for lower body, and then some of them coming together as you progress farther in, that you're doing them with full chain systems. Yeah?
Very well said. Yeah, yeah, very well said. Where the system came from was when these dysfunctions happened, we were taking care of them one way. We were bridging, side bridging, hip extension. And they're like, oh, keep doing it. It's going to stabilize the pelvis. Keep doing it. Like 8 weeks later, my back's killing me. Keep doing it. It's going to get better. It ain't going to get better. It's not getting better. And if you're not getting better, you better go out. And then that's where it all came from was, and if you train the abdominal, it was all crunches. You were on the ground. Well, when you're on the ground, your pelvis is fixed. And number one, when your thoracic spine lays down, it ain't going past the ground, right? It can't, you're limited to the ranges of motion that you could do. And so that's how we came up with the systems. The progressions are more based off of, something that can be elementary, from simple to complex, right? That's how we always want to try to build our systems out. But there are people that you'll get that could probably rip through the first couple progressions. And so if they're mastering the progressions, just go through them, right? But the systems are basically designed as an elementary entry-level position to come in. If they can master those, then you want to move into the next piece, But there's always exceptions to the rule. What I've learned in this business, there are no absolutes. There's a lot that has to be principally looked at and solutions need to be created off of, but there's always an outlier out there that comes in and you think you know it and you don't, right? That's the awesome part about it, though, is that you just want to go try to find someone that can potentially help teach those solutions. So progression 3, now we're going to have a dynamic pelvis and rib cage. We're going to start to go common and uncommon. So remember, I explained the common to you. If I split myself down the center of the body, and if I stayed on that side, that would be common. But if I crossed over that midline, it would be uncommon. So this is common. This is uncommon, okay? This is common. This is uncommon, okay? The sagittal plane gets a little tricky. Right? This is common. This is uncommon, okay? That's tricky for me anyway. Maybe it's not for you guys, okay? So now we're going to go bottom up and top down. This is a pivot matrix. So you see the athlete's pivoting in the sagittal plane. He's pivoting in the frontal plane, but he's got a 20-pound core ball that he's using in the transverse plane. Frontal plane is for the feet. I didn't do this video correctly because I didn't do the top-down driver. Green is the transverse plane. So it's a pivot. A pivot means this. So I talked to you about the vectors. Don't get me going low. Don't get me going, dude. Don't get me going. Don't. Look, I'm going to go to one vector, and I'm going to another vector without stopping. Okay? A lunge is I lunge and I come back to the base. If I pivot and I don't come back to the base, I'm going to go multiple vectors. That's a pivot. Okay? Logan and I have argued for years if it's a real movement. So that's why. But I classify it as a movement. But if you listen to us together, go at it, you would pick Logan's side. So don't listen to him while you're here. Here's the walking series. So I'm just moving continuously on a vector, a locomotor vector. Much more coordination, right? Where if I'm just lunging in one, but the continuous part creates another different kind of coordination factor to it. What arm driver do I have left? Transverse plane. I'm just changing the vector that I'm moving on. So it's a locomotor vertical core exercise. I'm just going from A to B. Locomotor would mean there's a particular distance. I'm A, you're B. I got to move from A to B. I could mark it at 15 yards, 20 yards, okay? You want to talk about metabolic training? Put a heart rate on. I'm not kidding you. Put a heart rate on your clients and do this. Watch what happens. And I'm walking. Like, I bet you I'm at 160 right now just from the continuous walking and throwing those things. And so your heart rate will function differently when it lacks the efficiency of movement. So when you're talking about conditioning, you're talking about the efficiency of movement. So getting up on a bike and a treadmill, you're going to get some work in your heart and lungs, yeah. But the more efficient you become at that movement under capacity, that's the key to really conditioning. Okay, so here's a med ball throwing. The reason it's level 3 is I'm moving away from the wall. So because of the distance to it, it's more complex. I have to create more force in order to load and throw the ball. The original progression, I was up close, right? So the rebound came back to me quickly. This one, I have to create massive loads to load and explode it to the wall. So basically, the distance is what creates it a level 3. Okay, here's level 4. We're going to start to pull in some pulley systems, and we're going to change the force vectors. I'll explain the force vectors to you here in just a second, which creates a little more challenge to the system. Then we're going to amplify the load with speed, and we're going to change the speed to it, which is going to create more power. So remember the quadratus lumborum that I talked to you about, right? Shifting from right to left, a base stance, he's basically perpendicular to the machine, but we're targeting the lateral part of the core, okay? We're actually targeting the back part of the core. So as I reach down, the pulley system's just eccentrically loading my posterior chain. And then I gotta push my feet through the ground to create the load to get it above my head, right? Now, this is one that I just want you to be careful, because when I used to go to these things, I would see these exercises and I was like, that looks cool, I'm gonna go do that. And that's actually not a good thing to think, to be honest with you. And I just share that with you because I've hurt some people, and I don't want you to hurt anybody. So this is a complicated exercise, but because of the force vector pulling me backwards, right? If I don't have the mobility in my T-spine, I could really slide through my lumbar spine. And so you could do one-arm drivers, which gets a little bit of rotation, but a double-arm driver, you really want to make sure that you have the extension through the thoracic spine. And if not, you got a chance to crunch the lumbar spine a little bit. You want to make sure that the shoulders and the thoracic spine have enough range of motion before you get into these. This is an awesome exercise, though. All of our guys can do these now. Some of our guys, it's taken a year to a year and a half to be able to get them into a position that they could actually do this, though. Okay, so here's the last piece to the core is, so we want to train it in all 3 planes of motion, right? That would be called grooving. We could groove the planes of motion. Then we want to enhance that with a load, medicine ball, the pulley, right? The dumbbells. That enhances the load. The last piece is we would call challenge. And challenge is basically, it would happen in a couple different ways. In this instance, I'm using my hands, a tactile force, for him to shift and change gears, and you'll see how I'm doing it. So his core has to activate according to the forces that I'm putting into him with my hands, okay? The other ways that we do that with lunge patterns and stuff, we do an auditory or a visual response. So I can point, right leg, left leg, right leg, left leg. Now I cognitively have to make a decision to the direction that I'm moving in, or I could say right, left, right, left. There's some kind of a decision-making process in the last layer of this, which is called challenge. So you'll see, I just got a hold of him. I'm trying to turn his shoulders, and he's resisting that deformation. And then, boom, I'm shifting gears, and now he has to resist that deformation going the other direction. Once again, though, this is an advanced exercise. So if you feel like the pelvis is really stable and your low back's in a good spot, great. And then you'll see I'll start to move him from the ground up. And you'll see he almost takes me and throws me across the room. This is Big Joe. This is Joel Embiid coming off of his second navicular surgery. And so we wanted to try to teach the foot how to create the loads where I had force on him, right? It was the last layer of his rehab. But we wanted to make sure that the navicular was really strong enough that as he had to duck into the post and take forces of warding off another body, that he could do that. And that requires a lot more load on the foot. So basically, here's the conclusion. The task dictates how the course should be trained. The client's abilities dictate the intensity of the progression of the training, and that the vertical core is just, it's functionally dense, right? If you're moving in 6 angulations from the top down and from the bottom up, you got a chance to keep your people healthy. I do have an Instagram account that my daughters helped me open up like 8 years ago. I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I did it. And some of these concepts are actually on there. I haven't posted in like, since this morning. No, I actually, the only time you guys saw my stories, right? My wife sends me stuff and it just says, add your story. So I just click on it, it goes to the story. But in my Instagram, it explains these at depth a little bit, some of the concepts to it. So if you want to check that out, great. And at some point in time, I'll probably post again. I'll share the story with you because my kids were like, hey, Dad, like I was at the table and I was like, I need to try to teach these guys how to do this stuff. They're like, open an Instagram. I go, what's that thing? They go, well, here. So they open it up for me and they helped me do the first couple posts, right? And I'm in a coaches meeting with the Sixers one day and the head coach goes, do you have an Instagram? I go, yeah. He goes, no. And I go, oh. I said, yeah, not a problem. I'll take it down. He goes, no, you can't. I go, why? He goes, management and the owners love it. And I go, well, I never posted again after that. But my kids are like, Dad, do you know you got 10,000 followers on Instagram? I go, no, what does that mean? Like, I got no idea. And I've had 10,000 followers like ever since then. Like, I don't post at all anymore. But there are some things on there educationally that you could grab some concepts out of. And then if you want to message me, I look at it like once a week. And so if you message me, like I'll hit you back on Instagram, you know. There are some references on how I built this thing out. And so that's in there if you guys want to see all the resources that I use to try to help, you know, build this system, and with a lot of help from a lot of great people.